the screen
Okay, fine.
stops. It'll fix itself.
No problem. Jeremy, I think it would be helpful for you to kind of maybe at the end or some point try to tell people where they can find this afterwards. I know there's people that aren't really having an ability to get the recording of it.
Okay, good.
So that's something that I think we need to do.
Absolutely. And Ellen, that'll be on the new page that was just made, right? The DDM LAC. You're muted, but I think you nodded.
Yeah, the video recording, it's already on DDMLA's Chinese Facebook page and also the English Facebook page. And I can forward that link to the group as well.
Oh, that's a good idea.
And the recording for today has started, as I noted.
Yes.
Okay, so and then you're going to give a quick recap of what we talked about, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I'll do the recap, and then right before I introduce you, and then you can just pick it up from there.
You can keep the introduction very short for me.
Yeah.
I think people know me by now.
Yeah, I was thinking about that after last week.
Yeah, I have this precious time to be able to do the Dharma, so I'm very cognizant of the time. But I was very happy last week. There was good questions. Took a while, but there was a lot of good questions that were presented. So can the other people see us or hear us now, or?
Yeah,
or
it should be good.
Okay. All right, I think we're about 7 straight up. We can start if you want.
Sure. Let's see. Now I want to make sure that I can have the grid back. There we are. Okay. Good evening. Let me say that again. Good evening, everyone. Wonderful to have each of you here. My name is Jeremy from Dharma Drum Mountain, Los Angeles Center. I'm part of the English Meditation and Discussion Group. It's my pleasure to be assisting Gilbert today. Before we begin, there are a few things. Number one, questions can be asked at any time using the raised hand or chat functions. We encourage everyone to turn their cameras on to give us a closer sense of community. And I'd like to let everyone know that this is currently being live streamed on the Dharma Drum Mountain LA Center's Facebook page, and will be available there if you'd like to rewatch. We will send links in the chat so that it'll be easier for you to find. We're continuing on the development of Chan from the beginning. Last week, we learned that the Sutra of 42 sections was the first teaching to arrive in China, and soon Buddhist images are seen on burial artifacts as early as the 1st and 2nd centuries. By the mid-5th century, the Lankavatara Sutra was translated by Gunabhadra, which helped to establish Mahayana practice. Around this time, the legendary period of Chan begins and lasts into the 8th century. The Lotus Sutra and Flower Adornment Sutra are translated and studied, having taken hundreds of years to arrive from India. The classical period, which was 675 to 950, follows with focus on study. As more teachings become available, individual schools develop. Gilbert mentioned Subitism, the concept of sudden enlightenment that set apart Huining School in the south. Lastly, in the literary period, which picks up from 950 into 1250, we see a creative representation of Buddhist practice in prose, poems, and artwork. With that, I hand it over to Gilbert for the second installment of this 6-part series. Thank you, Gilbert, for being here.
Amitofo, we will start with the 4 great vows. Please bow. I vow to deliver innumerable sentient beings. I vow to cut off endless vexations. I vow to master limitless approaches to Dharma. I vow to attain supreme Buddhahood. Amitofo. Okay, we start. Thank you, Jeremy, for the recap of last week. Chan is a difficult thing in terms of trying to say, okay, what are we learning? What is it? And it is kind of like the old story of the blind man touching the elephant and saying it looks like a tree, it looks like a snake, it feels like a branch, whatever, because depending on where you touch it, it looks a little bit different. And who is approaching it also, it looks in a different way. So sometimes people will say, oh, well, Chan, that's just sitting. It's just you're meditating, and they don't really study anything. They're thinking that this is intuitive and that there is this connection in this way. Yes and no. The thing about it is that I will start with a story that I've told many times, but it gives us an idea of the attitude that we should have when we practice. And that's where this one master told his young student, he goes, actually, I don't have anything to teach you. And the young student said, but why am I learning from you then if you have nothing to teach me, master? And he said, you learn from me until you realize I have nothing to teach. And it is in this way that one practices, and that we rely on the principle and we rely on the practice as well. Little by little, the Dharma for us changes. And in the beginning, of course, we have to learn the ABCs. We have to learn the language of Chan. And in this way, many philosophers, many historians, religious study people, they get Chan wrong. They're only touching one part of the elephant and they think that they know it. But Chan cannot be known. Chan, it cannot be taught. But nevertheless, we are here. I speak, and I speak until you realize it in this way. It's very, very different. But what distinguishes our school of Chan is the fundamental principles that we use. And these fundamental principles are such that we should become very acquainted with them. And as I mentioned before, that it's those principles, they set the table for us to practice, the foundation, the platform, if you will. And that platform is there for us to be able to practice in a sincere way. We practice just for the sake of practicing. We don't have an eye towards any kind of an attainment. And in fact, in the Heart Sutra, it corrects those who practice otherwise, saying there's nothing to attain. There's no wisdom nor any attainment. And you go, well, then what does this all mean then? And so you have to, that is where you begin to look at it, to contemplate. And so I wanted to go over a lot of the the principles first, so that we can go from there. The first is that our school belongs to the Mahayana School. So does the Tibetan schools. They also follow with this Mahayana School. The Mahayana School is the largest of all Buddhist schools in the world. And the manner in which we practice is one that we practice from wisdom and compassion, and practice in a way that ultimately we begin to see, by virtue of our realizations, that this suffering, and we understand the machinations of the Four Noble Truths, and we understand the machinations of the five skandha, that the five skandha produce an idea that there is a, as the Diamond Sutra says, a personality, an ego, or a life in being. The teachings say that that is not the case, and so we have to look at this. But the difficult part is because we have become so accustomed through our habitual tendencies that we do not see that this underlying truth. Eventually we get to the point where, if we practice well enough, we may achieve some form of a realization. Sometimes the realizations are realizations that still belong to the samsaric side. Other times it is like that you're able to peek outside of this samsaric world. I equate this to an egg. If one was inside an egg and was able to peck the shell of the egg, and then all of a sudden a different light, a different color, different sound comes in, something that is well beyond your ability in housed inside the egg to to uh, to comprehend or to conceive, because in fact it's inconceivable. And had you not broken the shell of the egg, then you would not have had that kind of an experience. Sometimes the egg seals back up, probably more often than not, the egg seals back up, but you still remember, you still have a glimpse of something. This is not enlightenment, but it's what I call a realization. The realizations can come to you in this way. If we liken it in this way, what we see is here. Maybe I better make it smaller. Okay. I have something on the other board. So we have an egg. Let me see. Sorry. There. And in the egg, we are, let's say, like a baby chick inside, and we're pecking at the shell of the egg. And we peck at it and peck at it. And then what happens is that on the outside, there are many, many helpers that are also pecking from the outside to get to the inside. These are bodhisattvas that help us try to get out of this egg. While we're in the egg, we look around and we see this environment, and then we say, this is reality, because there's nothing I could possibly think that could be outside of this reality. But when we see something, and then all of a sudden a ray of light comes in, we see something different. This is different. But we don't even know what it is yet, because we cannot fathom that. But we just know it's different. But we saw something, and then it dissipates after a while. But we know what we saw. Now, so a lot of times what happens when we're in the egg, we don't really have an idea of what that is. And sometimes we make up something. Sometimes we come to the point where we think, oh, that's it. I saw something. This is it. This is enlightenment, because I saw this little flash or whatever. But it's just a realization. The thing that's very important, and I don't know if Ling Yung is with us tonight, but she had sent me something from this Indian master, that he was talking about this, that if you become enlightened, you leave this world. And he said 99% of the people, if you become enlightened, you instantly leave this world. Not according to our school. And according to our school, because we're practicing in Mahayana, we want to fulfill the vows, just like the 4 great vows that we made in the beginning. That's a sincere vow. It's a sincere vow if you make it sincere. And this is the part of Chan, Dhyana, which means practice, that is critical to the way that we practice, that we have to understand this. In the beginning, all we want to do is stop the baby from crying. We're sitting in that egg and we are not comfortable. But then later on, what happens is that we are able to through our efforts begin to perceive, hey, I'm not the only one that's suffering here. There are many of us stuck in this egg. And as a result of that, we have an interest not only of getting ourselves out, but getting the others out too. If for some moment the egg shattered, and you would be able to, sorry, I should use the smaller board. You'd be able to see something here. Hold on. Here, and what you would see perhaps is uncountable Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. They're there going, wow, what took you so long? I've got my vow to, and then you at that point would understand that you would be able to perceive with the mind's own eye the inconceivable. The inconceivable is only inconceivable to the chicken or to the baby chick. It is without borders, infinite, and is known by mind simply because there's nothing separate from mind. And this is this idea of this Mahayana, where then we begin to look at it and then pay attention to whoever is still remaining in this dream state, that we could call it a dream state or this egg state. Some people equate it to the Tathagata Garbha, meaning the Buddha's womb. But what is really important about this, and what distinguishes this from what this one Indian master was saying, is that there's no place you go. You don't go any place. Here, how can you go outside of mind? It's ignorance to think that in here, in this egg, sorry, you are not in mind. You're precisely in mind. Where else would you appear? This is right view. Right view looks at everything and sees things just as mind. And when we see things in this way, it changes the way we look at it. It changes it. Maybe in some other practice, in a Theravadan practice, they're more interested in just getting out of town as quickly as they can, but not in our practice. Because there's no getting out of town. Any place is as good as another. There was a sutra that I discussed in my Monday night class, where the many Buddhas and Bodhisattvas were congregating on Earth, and they were all complaining about this was kind of a nasty place to meet. This is really bad. Why do you want to meet here? This is like so stinky, like hacho, it smells so bad here. The food is bad. The people, everything. And the Buddha corrected him and said, where do you think you are? Where do you think you are? This is the Buddha realm. It is your discrimination that changes it. This is the intuitiveness, the gnosis that one gets when one is able to break out of that egg and then look at it and say, wow, all of this is mine. And you look back at the egg and you go, that too is mine. Of course, this is right view. If we have right view, everything is governed in a better way. Without right view, we cannot develop bodhicitta, this interest in others. And it's kind of interesting because this is the Abhidharma. And in the Abhidharma is part of the Tripitaka of the Theravadins. And they have the Nikayas, the Vinayas, which are the monastic rules, and the Abhidharma. Abhi means the highest, and Dharma is the highest Dharma. So to them, this was the highest Dharma. And they talked about this. And it's kind of interesting because everybody in this day and age is very fashionable to finish their letter saying, Metta Gilbert, like love and everything. But it's become so fashionable that it's lost its real meaning. But in the Abhidharma, it talks about it, and it says that this is means to soften, to love. And it says goodwill, but benevolence, loving kindness are suggested as the best renderings. And it says metta embraces all beings without exception. And so then it says the culmination of metta is the identification of oneself with all beings. And in this way, when we say the identification, what we see is that all these beings are the Buddha mind. They're not other than the Buddha mind. So it's not that we're making identification with other lives and being. We're seeing it and we're saying, just this is mine. And the next entry here is Karuna, Karuna. And Karuna, it says, that which makes the heart of the good quiver, kind of move, when others are afflicted with sorrow, is Karuna. That which dissipates the suffering of others is Karuna. So right away you would think, what is the bodhisattva that represents Karuna in our practice? And that would be Guanxinpusa or Kuan Yin Bodhisattva. And so this is an embodiment of Karuna. Kuan Yin Bodhisattva is not a separate life and being. It is the actualization of compassion via Anyatara Samyak Sambodhi. And I mention that word because you've heard it, you've said it many times in the Heart Sutra, that when a practitioner attains Anyatara Samyak Sambodhi, the end result is compassion. Wisdom generates the compassion. And in this way, we see the things, and it's very, very important because this is Mahayana. And this is the manner in which we do it. We're not interested in leaving. Our practice is one that we see, wow, there's people suffering. And so when you see the people suffering, you don't pick and choose. Today there was a large march in Washington, and I noticed that they were all Trump supporters and they all were not wearing masks. So they're going to have a super spreader event and they're going to suffer. Yet I still give them blessings because it's their ignorance that they cannot see what they're doing. And I send the blessings to the families of them who will be touched by this or affected by this because of that. This is an ignorance that's there. And we don't see that. The ignorance is that we believe that the life in that egg is real. But when we begin to come out of it, when we look, we've now transcended or transformed this mind that we use. You could call it a realignment of the mind, to use the mind's own perception to see what is appearing within mind. We're no longer relying on the five skandha to give us a report, which is a very biased, discriminatory, habitual report. Rather, we use the mind's own perception that has none of that to it. It just sees it as it is. Sees it in its suchness that it belongs to mind. This is Chan. When we sit to meditate, we meditate it in a way that there's no thinking. There's no thinking is on the concept side. So what we do is we want to concentrate the mind, apply the mind just simply to rest. Many of us in our practice, or our daily practice or daily lives, people will tell us, hey, you need to slow down, you need to rest. And we go, oh, no. But we rest in the present moment by not discriminating in any way as to what we're encountering in the environment. We know all of that is appearances. It's transitory. It's not real. Inside the egg, it's not real. Nevertheless, those that are trapped inside the egg, they believe it to be real. They believe to be a life and being, an ego or personality, but it is not in this way. So when we look at things from the absolute side, we see that all of that is appearances that occur because of habitual tendencies. But there is something that matters about that. If I, in this moment, was to become enlightened, I sure as heck wouldn't leave you. I would just have a better ability to help you. Why on earth would somebody say, oh, 99% of them would leave? To me, that's preposterous. No, where would they go to? It doesn't make sense. So I hope, Ling Yun, this would answer your question with respect to this. Our school is Mahayana. We care. We care. And we care from the viewpoint of an unbridled compassion for all those that are stuck in this dream. And so rather than say someone is enlightened, we should say that a person is awakened to the fact that this mind, this very mind that we're using, this very mind that you're listening to me with, is not other than the Buddha mind. There, you have it. That's Chan. When we sit to meditate, we may have a realization that supports this, and one will see it's just mind, and it's clear about it, and that will produce a stronger resolve to assist others, not to jettison yourself from here, because there is no place. It's just like the story of Shuren Kong, the Monkey King, challenging the Buddha that he could go somewhere where the Buddha could not be. And he raced through the universe and thought he had lost the Buddha. I'm making this a very short version of the story. But ultimately, the Buddha found him and actually was holding him in his hand. And the three mountains that he thought he was seeing were just his fingertips of the Buddha. And in this way, there's no place that one goes to. Even Shipu, he was very, very important in terms of stressing that. He had told a story about a master that went to a temple that had recently lost, or not, excuse me, I'm getting ahead. He went to a temple to visit the people there, the monks. And then as he was there, they were taking him on a tour of the temple, and he came upon a hallway, and then there was a picture of a monk. And so the master, he points to the picture and says, you know, who is this person? And they go, oh, him? He was our master, but he has gone away. And the master just kind of bent his head for a moment, looked down, and then looked up and said, and exactly where did he go to? This is our school. There's no going away. All of that is an illusion. And when we see that, then now we know what we're talking about, Chan. I'm coming here to teach you Chan, but I don't want to withhold the profound truth in terms of what you're doing when you're sitting on a cushion. You do not want to sit on a cushion without understanding what you're doing there. You, at best, can become very proficient in crossing your legs and appearing to be like a stone lion. But at my retreats, I don't want stone lions. I want sincere practitioners that will use their concentration to apply contemplation. The concentration is what I would call a booster rocket to get you up into space. Once the mind is very stable and then samadhi takes over, we do not need the concentration. There is the true contemplation. The mind simply at rest, completely aware in all directions, completely oriented as to all times. It's inconceivable. If you try to sit and emulate what I just said in words, you're wasting your time. You're not going to get any kind of an appreciable result out of it. But if you just sit, mo chao, just sit. What else is there to do? Shifu, he would say that you give the body to the cushion and the mind to the method. And then we practice in this way. When we practice, when we use the tenets of our school, the principles of them, then we are prepared when we sit not to be confused. So many times we're confused about what we're seeing, and we're fabricating fantastical appearances or colors or whatever that comes up. But this is not chant. This is just illusion. The more we sit and we concentrate on the contemplation, the mind becomes clearer. It begins to seize these things, and we begins to see the ideas of thoughts, not even a thought anymore, but the ideas of thought begin to percolate around our awareness, and just kind of like trying to rush in. And every once in a while, something will take a rush towards the center, and maybe it's a financial problem or a love interest or something that you want to do, and then at that point, then we are lost. We're caught up in the thought, but we just have to simply just let it go, let it dissipate, come back to the method. The sincere practice is what gets us there. So this is chant. But if we understand what we're doing on the cushion, then we can do well. Shifu, he used to say, do you come to the retreat to practice your legs or practice the method? Because there was a lot of people all the time. There'd be people that could sit for a long period of time, but they, in their mind, they would just be wah, 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 wah. And so even now, when I go to a retreat and I stand behind people, you can feel whether their mind is actually very stable, or there's just this wah-wahing going on inside their head. But outside, they look like a stone lion. They look like they're doing very, very good. But I cannot go into their mind. I can only say, go back to the method. Just go back to the method, to try to shake them from this stupor that they have gotten into. Even though they've trained their body, their mind still has not been trained. That requires virya, a great effort. And when we have a great effort, this sincere, supreme effort, we can do that. If we don't, it doesn't work. So when we talk about the practice, we have to understand first Mahayana. Next thing is what Bodhidharma had presented, was Ekayana. Remember, we talked about this Ekayana, meaning just this mind. There's not anything else. It's just this mind without even referring to it as the one. It is what the one returns to. So this mind is without calling it anything. It is why they use the term thusness or suchness. So thus come one, Tathagatha, Tathagatha, thus gone one, mean the same thing. It is the suchness of the mind. So when we say it's gone, you say, where did they go? Well, that's why they say thus come or thus gone, meaning the same thing. It is just simply in mind, but the illusion of an independent life and being, a soul, is now been undermined by first the principle and second the practice. And because of this, then the mind has become stable, and there's not an inconsistency or a contradiction in that, saying that. So this Ekayana then leads us to the concept of sunyata, which is emptiness. So today I'm going to go very doctrinal with you, as what we're going to be studying. And so this emptiness is a very interesting ball of wax, because it's not something that is a thing. It's certainly not a ball of wax. It is something that permeates everything. And it would be better for us, rather than to say it's empty, it would be better to say that it is full, that it encompasses everything. How does it encompass everything? It encompasses it from the concept of the dependent origination. What the Buddha taught from the very beginning, dependent origination. Everything is connected. How is it connected? It's connected in mind because every piece of it, every single atom, subatom, the smallest particle, what the ancients would call a mote of dust, is just simply mind. And so when we see things in this way, we are clear about that, because we constantly are returning the mind to mind. And so if we're practicing with the idea that we are going to get something, the only thing we'll get is a sore bottom. But if we practice in a serious way, then there's no limitation to what one can achieve. This we talked about this a moment ago, but this development of wisdom and compassion is very important. Can you hold on just 1 second? I'm sorry. I think one of my dogs is trapped in a room. I keep hearing scratching. I'm sorry. Go upstairs, both of you. And I thought I was through raising children. So one of the dogs was trapped in the room, was scratching. Sorry. If anybody's doing the transcription, just ignore that part. We're going back. This idea of our practice is set out in our Heart Sutra. And this was the one of the major chant texts that came up. The Heart Sutra was more of a manifesto than actually a sutra. It was very tiny, but what it was doing was distinguishing between the idea of that of the Abhidharma school, which we just talked about, where everything is considered to be real, saying everything is connected, everything is real. But in the Heart Sutra, it talked about, no, Sariputra, form is not an emptiness, emptiness is not than form. And who is telling him this is Kuan Yin Bodhisattva, not Manjusri. This is a wisdom sutra. But Kuan Yin is telling him this. Why? Because the end product of the wisdom is this Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. This is leading towards enlightenment. To simply say, I want to leave here, is not leading towards enlightenment. One may be able to do that, but this is not a complete enlightenment. Complete enlightenment is one in which one dwells in the world to assist in the delivery of those sentient beings or illusory sentient beings that are still trapped in the idea that there is an ego, personality, or life and being there. So this was the Mahayana shot across the bow to the Theravada saying, Abhidharma is not bad, but nothing's real. It is empty. And this emptiness is there. When we look at this emptiness, then what Nagarjuna said was he was looking at this emptiness and saying, oh, okay, well, we see the egg and all around it, it's all empty. It's not just simply real in that way. It is, this emptiness is because it is not a thing. It is just simply mind as it is. And when we see it, we see that it functions in a certain way. If you look back at, I think I did a 4-part series of the boy named Inconceivable Radiance, and that will help you begin to understand in a very profound way what the Buddha is doing and how he does this, because this young man was questioning the Buddha as to whether or not there's anybody to save. Why are you doing this? What does this all mean? And then essentially the Buddha kept coming back and saying, because it's there, it has to be done. And so that helps you to be able to understand the Mahayana principle. And when we begin to study in this way, it goes to our heart. It's Heart Sutra, right? It goes to our heart. What is the heart? It is the heart of the original face before you were born. It is the heart of the mind, not the heart of an individual, but the heart of the mind. And that is what is capable of producing great change in this world. So this is Mahayana, this is Chan. When we sit, we don't sit to escape or go somewhere. We don't do that. What we do is we sit so that we clarify the mind to see exactly mind, just mind, no concepts of it. If you begin to say, oh, I see, or you begin to have some kind of concepts or imageries that are there, you're off. Just put it down, go back to practicing. If you're sitting there and the Buddha appears before you, push the Buddha out of the way. Wrong line, wrong place. You're practicing. The Diamond Sutra says that the Buddha cannot be known by his 32 marks. Why? Because everything is mind. When we abandon the idea of appearances, then in this way, everything becomes clear. So I know, you're waiting for a historical thing in terms of Chan, but this is what's happening in terms of Chan, what was happening at that point where Chan was coming into play, and the dawning before Bodhidharma, and then about 100 years later, Bodhidharma shows up in the 5th century, and what does he bring with him? He brings the Lankavatara Sutra with him. Let me see if I have the Lanka here. And you could talk for weeks on the Lankavatara Sutra, but I wanted to give you a couple of excerpts from it so that you have an idea of what was happening and why he brought this. And so when the people read this, they were just simply going, what is this? This is like, it was like a schematic of mind. And so when they saw that, they were completely floored. It was in a language that had not been heard before. It was like, I hate to quit it, but it was like listening to Jimi Hendrix during my time period. And the first time you heard Jimi Hendrix play a guitar, nobody played like that. Not even any of the people from England at that point. They didn't know where that was coming from, but they were sold. They saw that. And so when the Lankavatara Sutra comes on, it is speaking philosophically and doctrinally, and to something that they'd never heard, but it made sense, and it was something that they were very much interested in. So, but again, this was not something that was a simple read. It was something that required time and time and time again to go back and try to understand it. So I'll read you one part here. Let me see if I can see where we're going with it. Okay. So I'm taking you back, and imagine Bodhidharma's handing him this book to read, and the sutra. And so they're sincere, just like you are. They want to listen to this. So listen to this language that he's talking to him about. Mahamati Bodhisattva again asked the Buddha, Bhagavan, and then Bhagavan means like honored one. In how many ways do the various forms of consciousness arise, persist, and cease? The Buddha told Mahamati, there are two ways in which the various forms of consciousness arise, persist, and cease, both of which are beyond the understanding of logicians. The two ways in which the forms of consciousness arise are continuity and characteristic. The two ways in which they persist are continuity and or as characteristic. And the two ways in which they cease are the continuity or as characteristic. And the different forms of consciousness, Mahamati, have three aspects of unfolding aspect, karmic aspect, and intrinsic aspect. So here he's saying they have certain rather than aspects, features or quality to them, without the idea of quality as being high. It just what they are. So this unfolding, the karmic, and this intrinsic. And he says, Mahamati, what we generally speak of 8 forms of consciousness, now he's introducing the Yogacara school to the audience. So the Yogacara school is also linked to the Lankavatara Sutra. Chan is not separate from the Yogacara school, nor is it separate from the Madhyamika school or the Tian Tai school or the Huayan school. They're all interacting in their own directions. But here, he's teaching them about the Yogacara school, this idea of eight consciousness. And he said, and they can be summarized under 3 headings: true consciousness, perceiving consciousness, and object projecting consciousness. So he's saying all of these things, that arise. And I am trying to think, somebody in my mind work group was asking, about consciousness and the effect on karma. But here he's kind of breaking it down, saying there's this true consciousness, which is a perception of the mind by a Buddha. Perceiving consciousness is that of the 5 skandhas, and object projecting consciousness, which is a confusion in the mind. Mahamati, our perceiving consciousness functions like a clear mirror in which shapes and images appear. Mahamati, although perceiving consciousness and object percepting consciousness are the cause, whether they are separate from each or not, perceiving consciousness, Mahamati, is the result of imperceptible habit energy and imperceptible transformations, while the object projecting consciousness is the result of grasping different phenomena and habit energy. So he's giving them a big bite of the Yogacara school, saying, you have to see how this all functions. In this way, the school is it is in some ways is not separate from what the Abhidharma was doing. And in the Abhidharma, the Abhidharma was making a schematic of mind as well. The only difference was the orientation was everything is real. Yogacara was the mind only school that, and then the turned to the Sanlun school in China, and there was a sinification or Chinese spin on the Yogacara school. All of this coming out of the Lankavatara Sutra. So early on, there's a lot of doctrine here, a lot of doctrine in terms of what is happening. And in this, it says, Mahamati, when all the false projections obscuring our consciousness cease, all forms of sensory consciousness cease. So when the false projections cease in the true consciousness and actually in mind, then all forms of sensory from consciousness, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, all of those are all breaking down. And so that is meant by cessation of characteristics. Mahamati, as for the cessation of continuity, when the cause of continuity ceases, the continuity itself ceases. It ceases when what depends upon and what supports it cease. So this is very, very interesting. I'll just finish up a little bit more, and then I'll kind of draw a diagram to tell you what was happening here. It ceases so. This is because it is dependent. What it depends upon is the habit energy of the beginningless projections. And what supports it are the projections of the objects of consciousness perceived by one's own mind. And so and I'm doing this because there's so many people think that Chan doesn't have any of this. But if you look at all the writings from all of the masters, the patriarchs down to all of the Chan masters, Ling Chi, Matsu, Bai Song, all of them talk about this. And so what we have is, use this one instead. It's a little bit smaller. Had something written, but wow, it's almost time. To me, this seemed like 5 minutes, sorry. But what I want to do is, let me see if I can find the way to do this. They're talking about 8 consciousness. They have the Alaya Vijnana at the top. This is the 8th consciousness. And then you have the Manos consciousness, Manovijnana consciousness. This is the 7th and the 6th. And then below that are 5 consciousness of the senses. So you have these 5 consciousnesses of the senses, and then it all puts into the 6th consciousness, which is formulates an opinion on it. It looks at something, it smells it, it sees it, and it may say, oh, I see that, and that from my perception of all this information, I see it as an apple. And then the 7th consciousness is one where it perfumes this, it affects this, and says that these consciousness, I like an apple, or I don't like apples because I'm old and they break my teeth or whatever, or I got sick when I was a kid. So all of this comes from an interaction with the Alaya Vijnana, and this information comes to the 7th consciousness. But as we begin to practice this, hold on. my 6 and 5 went away. As we begin to practice it, we see that the fifth consciousness is empty. And as a result that it's empty, then it no longer is producing images up to the sixth consciousness. And so then this becomes very, very, very shaky. Very shaky. And the seventh consciousness is going, I'm waiting for information. I'm waiting for something. The seventh consciousness is you sitting in meditation, contemplating, and the mind is clear and is no longer producing habitual tendencies or illusions. It is just simply sitting precisely and clearly. When that happens and these images begin to become destroyed, all of this begins to become unstable. And what happens then is that all of this disappears momentarily, leaving you only with the alaya vijnana, the storehouse consciousness. And in that moment, the mind is seen for what it is. And this is what is happening, very deep philosophical. And I know some of you are not going to be able to get what I'm talking about, but it's okay. Don't have fear about it, and don't say, oh, this is way up there. Just understand that this is the roots of Chan. So all of this from the Yogacara school, from the Madhyamika school of emptiness, all work together. And in terms of producing this and seeing that was what they were talking about in the Lankavatara, that it ceases producing the habitual tendencies. And then as a result, what's left is just mind. So we no longer call it the alaya vijnana because the storehouse consciousness is actually known by its real name, which is that. It's kind of like Prince when he changed his name to a symbol so that nobody could actually call him anything. And the same thing with this practice, it is in this way. So these are some of the basic understandings of how this works. In terms of this, I think I covered most of this kind of an understanding of where Chan was coming to. This is the school of Chan that comes in and is very, very deep, extremely deep. It uses all of the other schools. It takes the best of those schools and understands it, and it's tried and true in terms of the way it practices. Let me see if I have. That's the wrong one. Hold on. Part of what bothered me was that I was reading before this class a religious study professor writing and saying, oh, well, actually, the Chan school is doesn't rely on words and phrases, but he misunderstood it. And he was thinking that, well, we don't study anything. And because everything is not that way, but it's wrong. It's wrong for us to have that kind of an understanding. When we practice what we practice, we understand why we're sitting. It's very important when you're meditating to know why you're sitting there. You don't just simply sit in a vacuum. What you do is that you know what's there, and you use all the tools that have been given to you to keep your mind on the method. You don't have to recall them in your mind. They're already there. They're already the platform in which you sit. It is much a platform as the platform that you would sit in meditation, or the cushion you would sit in meditation. It is the mental platform that's there that enables you to keep your mind in a very calm state. and keep the contemplation and investigation. What Bodhidharma was very proficient at was wall gazing. But this wall gazing that he did, people take this to understand that it was he just sat there like like a like a stone lion, or what some master would say, a cold stone, um, you know, in cold water. Nothing's happening. It wasn't in that way. It's dynamic. It's dynamic. It's dynamic because otherwise, why would he bring the Lankavatara Sutra with him? I only read a little portion of it that only pertained to Yogacara school, but there's so many other references to Madhyamika school, to the Ekayana. All of these things are so important. Our school is very, very, very proficient at understanding Buddha Dharma, and it was like a big bucket that everything was flowing into. And when this bucket, everything flew or flowed into this bucket, we used it, we understood it, we studied it. And when we go through some of the masters later on, I will point to you and I'll say, you see, where do you think he got this from? He got this from this training here, from Yogacara school, from Madhyamika school, from wherever. That and you will see the traces of this that follow right from the very beginning, from Bodhidharma all the way down through all the patriarchs, and then continue on from there. This is our school. This is what we still have a few more classes that will be able to do this, but this particular session was one to begin to tell you to understand what are the basic foundations of our practice, and they were there from the very beginning. So I think I passed my time, so I will allow for questions now. You should have questions.
Thank you so much, Gilbert. So yes, next we will have the Q&A. I'll remind everyone that you can ask your questions in the chat, or you can use the raised hand function and we'll call on you. I'll watch the chat box as well. And you can ask questions on this talk or any general meditation practice questions. All are welcome. Before we begin the Q&A though, I'd like to take a brief moment to thank everyone for being here and to thank the EMD team for their help in prepping this event. We at the English Meditation and Discussion Group, Dharma Drum Mountain LA Center, would also like to invite you to join us for our weekend Zoom meetings. Saturday's book study begins at 9 a.m. and Sunday's video Dharma talk is at 10. So with that, feel free to ask away. While they're coming in, I have a question that I can ask. This is all very new for me. I was not aware of Dharma Drum Mountain at all until 1 year ago. And I love learning the history, and what I've learned so far has been very basic, and I love that this is an opportunity to go in much more depth. Prior to last week, I had never heard of the Lankavatara Sutra. And you know, it's beautiful to learn the importance of the history and what was available. And when you were talking last week about the Sutra of 42 sections and saying that for like 500 years, that's what they had until the Lankavatara Sutra was translated. And now, because we spent today talking about that, I'm wondering if, you know, do you believe that there was an advantage to only having that sutra being available so they could go so deep into it versus, or would there have been, I mean, I guess it doesn't matter because it was the way that it was, but, you know, nowadays having access to so much to study, it can be, I mean, at least for me, it's very overwhelming, and I look forward to looking into all the sutras that you mentioned as I become aware of them. But trying to imagine that at that time, the Lankavatara Sutra and the 42 sections and whatever else they had, it was such a like lesser amount of material, but obviously no limit to the depth that was also available there. So what are your thoughts on that as far as maybe advantages that they would have had at that time with like only having that sutra available to them and being able to go so deep into it compared to today?
Well, it is good. It depends on the sincerity of the practitioner. You know, even in those days, if they read it and they thought that they got so far, then that's it. And there's a story of Hui Ning and this one gentleman, a lay person that had recited, I forgot what sutra it was, but he committed it to memory and he recited it so many thousand times. So when he went to see Hui Ning, he bowed, but his head did not touch the floor. And Hui Ning says, you know, I noticed your head did not touch the floor. You know, is there something wrong with you? You know, and he was kind of pointing out to him his idea that he thought he had gotten everything from that sutra, and then Hui Ning proceeded to explain the sutra to him in a manner in which, you know, was beyond his understanding. And so the thing is that one has to have the proper heart. And if one has the proper heart, and if all you've got is a Lankavatara Sutra, that's good. At least you have something. But now we have this ability to jump from one sutra and we can see a word. I don't know that word. Boom, I'm on my phone. What does that word mean? Okay, what is the meaning of it? So I'm able to pull all this information in a very quick time, and then begin to do this where they didn't have anything like that. They didn't have an Encyclopedia Britannica that contained all of these knowledge and timelines and everything else. They just had whatever scrolls they had to do that. And so you had to be good. But one of the things that we I don't think I talked about here, but there's a term called Vaipula and Pulya. And Vaipulya means that this Lankavatara Sutra contains the fundamental teachings of the Mahayana School. Same for let's say, the Diamond Sutra or the Flower Adornment Sutra. Those are Vaipula. The Queen Sharmala's Lion's Roar Sutra, Tathagata Garbha Sutra. All these sutras stand alone. And if all you had to study was that, that's good, because you're going to penetrate it no matter what. It doesn't matter what, you know, where you're at or where you open up the book. You open it up and then you penetrate it. So it's a matter of the sincerity of the person. But we are so rich with the Dharma right now. It helps us to enable that, to be able to read commentaries on things. But we have to make it our own, and we have to bring it to life. We have to bring these ancient masters in these situations to life. And so that's how we practice. Okay. I saw there was a couple of questions.
Yes, and if you'd like to speak, you can also unmute yourselves and speak to ask. Some of the questions that came in were regarding the Saturday morning book study that I had mentioned, and Ellen and Henry, I think, both sent some information there.
Okay.
So hopefully that answered the questions. Does anyone else have something to ask? Yume, was that your hand? Yeah, can you unmute? Yes, okay, you may, go ahead.
Yeah, I just sent in the chat. Thank you so much, Gilbert. That was very powerful when you mentioned about the 8 senses or 8 consciousness. I remember in Mahayana School, there's a saying about people, we should use more 5 senses, the formal 5, 1 to 5 senses, but not to use too much on for the 6 senses. Is that true?
Well, what they're saying is this, and in the Yogacara school, what that's why I was saying the seventh consciousness is the one that is defiled. That's the one where the mind moves and discriminates and picks and chooses. And so what you're reading is them saying that the 5 senses are undefiled. They enable the mind to contemplate. There's nothing wrong with that. The 6th consciousness is undefiled. It's just reporting what the 5 senses are providing. The 7th consciousness is the one in which we begin to cling to things and pull down from the 8th consciousness what are called bija, bija, and these bija seeds, they perfume the 7th consciousness and give it the impression that it exists. But when we begin to meditate, then we no longer rely on the 7th consciousness. And so when we just simply sit in mind, what happens is that the 5th through the 6th consciousness no longer serve as a support for the 7th consciousness to create any habitual tendencies, as you saw in the Lankavatara Sutra, and the whole thing collapses. That collapse then is seen clearly as just simply the facade of the individual life and being or personality. Ego, it just simply is seen as illusory. So that's why what you were reading, it is correct in that way, but in the way of saying, that we cannot trust the 7th consciousness in the manner in which it produces ignorance. And the ignorance, the fundamental ignorance, this nescient entrenchment, as recited in the Queen Shamala Devi's Lion's Roar Sutra, is the idea of clinging to an ego. And as so long as we have that, then we cannot make progress. I mean, when I say progress, is it pretty much awaken. So when we see that for as it is, and then ultimately experience that, where it's as if it's a play and all the scenery collapses and then it just reboots. Maybe nowadays we would say like a computer that gets a blue screen and then it reboots and everything's back there. But we saw that blue screen. We knew that there was something up with all of that. So everything still remains the way it is. We function in the world. We only function better because we no longer are producing the habitual tendencies that cloud the mind.
Thank
It's a
you.
good question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ling Yun raised her hand.
Yes.
Hi, Gilbert. I just very much appreciate that you spent time to explain that the difference between Chan right view with that YouTube, because Sadhguru has been very popular right now in addressing a lot of social issues. But regarding the Chan practice, regarding the meditation practice, it is in a way it's very easier to get into that kind of when you practice samadhi.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I'll give to you, pass to you to explain.
Yeah. It was actually when I heard that right before I came on here, and I was a little bit perturbed by that. And the thing is that I wish I had the long beard, or whatever, and spoke like a guru, because then people would listen to me. So I think eventually Santha, one of my senior students, she's Indian, and she really sounds very authoritative because she has that Indian accent. So I think she'd be perfect as a Dharma teacher, because people just will see her as authoritative because of that. It's like people thinking English people with an English accent, they're more intelligent or sophisticated or whatever. But I was listening to what he was saying, and I was, in the beginning, I was going, okay, okay. And I went, no, 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 there's no Mahayana, there's no Karuna here. What the heck are you talking about? And so that really kind of got to me. That's why I mentioned it. So I hope that explains it.
There are two questions that came in. One from Esther that says, what's the difference between realization and being awakened? And then Marie adds, is being awakened our end goal?
It being awakened is an end. It is what Shifu would say is to suffer, not suffer, is to experience the great death, the death of, we can die, but that's a little death because we keep coming back. And so Shifu would say, you know, are you afraid of death? And people go, yes, Shifu, I'm afraid of dying. And he says, no problem, because no matter what, you know, you come back anyway. It's like trading in an old car for a new car. He says, not that bad. No, to me, I just say, if you practice no matter what until you become awakened, then you would, it's like a lifetime guarantee. You're guaranteed to come back. You know that. So there's no pressure on you. The idea of realization is that one begins to get some small inklings of this that go beyond an intellectual understanding. Sometimes the mind just simply stops, but information is there. Sometimes the mind will teach you, and no, I don't want to go into too much of the super mundane aspect of it, but it is in this way where we can experience something, but it helps us to do things. I remember a long time ago, Mei-Ling Cheng, I had said something to her, and and she got a realization out of it, and it was a good realization. And I said, this is a turning phrase. It turns, and you begin to see that there is, you know, mind as it is. Now, no, that wasn't an awakening for her, or complete enlightenment, but it was a very good sign. It was very good because of her sincerity of how she practices. Since then, I'm sure she's had many realizations, and those realizations are the aspect of our school which is the esoteric aspect of it, that which is intuitive side. That when I say intuitive, it is just simply connecting with mind itself. And so an awakening, one can have an awakening, isn't necessarily enlightenment, but where one has the ability for a short while, up to a long while, it could last several months, where one has using the mind's own perception to perceive the world. You're still functioning in the world, but you're straddling the samsaric world and the and mind, and its infinite possibilities, infinite time, all of that. One knows that one's still here, but this is what would be awakening, not necessarily enlightenment, but it is one that, if it's used in the proper way, where you're not walking around going, I'm awakened. You know, if somebody comes to me and says I'm awakened, you know, I will slap them and say, well, I was just checking to see if you were awake or not. But it's something that's good. It can happen. And so this is the difference. There's the realizations that they can come from reading, or they can come from sitting. Sometimes when we sit, you know, we fabricate something, but it isn't really a true awakening. But generally, the master would know if that was an awakening or not. Okay, more questions?
Thank you.
Yes. Marie, I guess, has a follow-up question that says, how does one know one is awakened?
You won't be there, so the question is kind of irrelevant. If you're looking for a like a Star Trek patch that you went to the Crab Nebula galaxy or whatever, then you'd need not bother apply. That it is just something that transcends the idea of that there's an ego there. You cannot bring your ego with you. I remember a long time ago, I had one student who was trying so hard, and I said, you should next time bring a camera and put it down by your cushion, so that the moment that you become enlightened, that you can take a picture of yourself. And so he understood what I was saying, because it wasn't the proper attitude. So we don't think about that. We don't think about if I have that or not. If you want to talk to someone, you can seek advice, but it has to be a very well-known advisor. Don't seek advice from someone that doesn't have some good experiences. When I was starting out, I remember when one master from China, he said to me, "Oh, Gilbert, you got it. You're enlightened." And to me, I just went, "Doesn't feel like that to me." I think I just keep practicing. And that was the best advice I ever gave myself, is not to seek anything. And even in retreats and stuff, the more progress I made was when I just was no longer interested in making progress, but simply just practicing sincerely. And that's done me very well throughout all of these years. So that's a very common question, and it's a good one to ask, because we go, well, am I enlightened, or whatever, and you just have to ask somebody, and there's a few here, and one master was talking, I know I'm seeing Sue there, and I said, one master, he was saying that the best advice that his master told him was not yet. And so when you see things in this way, that it just say to yourself, not yet. And if you hear it, then it, not yet. You just don't hold on to that at all. It just comes naturally. It's natural because it's mind. So the mind comes when the self is gone. Okay.
Wendy asks how not to be afraid of death.
We really sincerely practice well. We see that this world is an illusion, and as we see this world as an illusion, then we don't have that kind of a clinging to hear. The more we cling, the more we'll be afraid. And so I've seen people pass away. I've seen my mother had, like Shifu, a perfect ending to her life. And she was a week before she died, she was actually dancing with the priest that came to give her last rites. And then right before she lost consciousness, she was blessing the priest. And so this is the way to go. But I've seen people who are so afraid to die, and at that time, because they have more yin chi than yang chi, they become very frightened, because their enemies or ghosts can come to surround them, and they have a great confusion. And so they have a great fear. So this is kind of a harbinger that of what's going to happen in the next lifetime with that. So you just let that go. You don't cling to that, and if you see the people in this way, that's why we use the ceremonies of people reciting the Amitabha, no and surround the person with this kind of a recitation to help them, and also to keep away any kinds of vexing spirits or ghosts or enemies that come to try to exact some revenge against the person. And so you try to keep them calm, and so you should not fear that. I also have the kind of an interesting way, Wendy, is that earlier this year in March, the beginning of March, I almost died, and I was more dead than alive. And when they were trying to revive me, I didn't want to come back here. Every time I came back, I felt like I was underwater, and couldn't breathe. And I just felt very comfortable in the other place. When they say don't go into the light, well, that was very comfortable. So I don't think you should fear anything. Trust me, it's probably a lot better. So at least you can take a rest for a while.
Wow, that's yeah, I had no idea. Thank you for sharing that experience. And I'm so glad that you came back and that you're here.
Yeah, better me than you.
We have a question from John who says, today you mentioned about the apple in the sixth consciousness. In the past, you also mentioned about you see me, but I don't see you. Could you please elaborate?
When we see the world, we see it as an illusion. We know that this world is a dream. I know this world's a dream. I'm talking to a dream who's asking me a dream question in a dream environment. Everything is a dream. If we cling to this life, then we confuse the essence of the mind, and as a result of it, we have in mind there's a pocket of confusion. The mind, through its karuna, it wants to relieve this, and so as it sees things, it sees it as a dream. When we look at the world this way, and we constantly are recertifying to ourselves this is a dream, then we are at peace. I was talking about the when I was on the plane and I was almost dying. Every time I woke up, I just said, or I came back to consciousness, I just said, this is a dream. This is a dream. And so you see the world in this way. It's just a dream. And so it was actually very, very peaceful. But I guess I had more to give, in the samsaric realm. So here I am in this dream world. But I never lose sight of this. But in this dream world, although we see the sentient beings as being an illusion, nevertheless, we know that within that illusion, within that dream, that little chick that was in the egg is a bodhisattva, is a Buddha. It already is that. We don't have to create it. It already is. In the Tathagata Garbha, the Buddha womb, everything is created from there. But that mind, the difficult thing is, because I'm going to talk about this and you may not understand it, but this mind, this very mind that you're using right now, is not other than the Buddha mind. And so when you see the world in this way, oh, hey, there must be a dog walking by. So in any case, we see the things as they are, and we're not confused about it. That's what I mean by that. So when we see the apple is an apple, but we know that it's a dream eating a dream apple. And we see things in this way. We know that if we cling to this world, we fear death. If we cling to this world, we're going to come back again. You know, if we don't cling to the world, we come back by virtue of our vows out of choice. So we could be a non-returner or a once returner, or at a choice, a bodhisattva. There's a difference. And a bodhisattva just goes wherever they need to go. And in this way, this is how we practice. So hopefully you'll be able to get a little bit of that. This is beyond Chan 101 now. But this is a true practice.
We're reaching 7:30. Are there any final questions that anyone would like to ask? One just came in from Brian. How do you differentiate contemplation and no thinking in Chan?
There's no difference. No thinking. When I give a lecture, the mind has no thought. Although it has many thoughts, they're only used for the purposes of conveying whatever I want to say. And the idea of contemplation is we keep the mind contemplating, and by using this contemplation, then what we do is that enables us to see things as they really are. So now we are operating and functioning by virtue of mind itself. Hey, quiet. Sorry about that. And so we are clear about that, and then that way we keep the mind very stable. So when we have thought, we have many thoughts, but we don't cling to them. We just use them for the purposes of whatever is necessary in that moment, and the purposes of fulfilling our vows. So we're very aware of body, speech, and mind, and we make a present moment decision to maintain the Buddha mind. The Buddha mind has its own perception, which is much greater than the perception from the five skandha, because the Buddha mind perception is like a water droplet knowing what all the other water droplets in the ocean are doing at the same time. Try to contemplate that.
Any others? Okay, I think we're good for today. Thank you, Gilbert, for answering the questions and for the talk today.
You're welcome, and thank you all for coming and share this with everyone. And I probably went a lot deeper than I intended today, but it just seemed to flow that way. So if you're confused, it's okay. Don't worry about being confused. That's a good thing at this point. Okay. And if you made some progress, good for you too. So we'll see you next week, and I'll come up with a different avenue of how to practice this. Okay. Amitofu.
Everyone bow to teacher.
We covered a lot of ground today. That was good. Hello, Mei, I see you there.
Can you unmute?
Thank you, Gilbert.
There we go.
Thank you, Gilbert.
I always have you. I'm always thinking about you. Because I really want you to work in Toronto and spread the Dharma. I have certain people that I know that they're very good practitioners, and so I talked to Changhua about all of you, my regulars, and to say that these are the leaders from the future. So you have to now also, bring up those that will replace you as well.
We're still doing a Thursday night group sitting every week here in Toronto.
Yeah, just don't hold back on the profound. Give them really teach them the profound as much as you can. The more you do that, the more that you will pick up yourself. Don't be afraid of that. Don't just keep repeating the things that you guys already know. You have to go beyond that. Okay, I'm talking to all of you. I see Eon and Sue here too, Anyi Pan. All of you, you have to really push the envelope. Get into a position where it's a little bit uncomfortable for you, but little by little, if you feel uncomfortable about things, then what you do is you just, you can talk to me or whatever, and I will help you with that. But like I said, don't keep teaching the same thing. If you always just teach ABCs, it is of no value. So no, you have to really try your best to teach the profound and try to see the or feel the esoteric, and that comes with contemplation, and if you do that, it will come to you. Pratika Samapada, cause and condition never fail. Why? Because this very mind is your mind. There's nowhere else to find it. And so if you understand that, then it will work for you. I'm so blessed by having so many different good practitioners from different centers. Ohio, Chicago, Toronto, Washington, San Francisco, all these different places that are there. And some of them, such as Robert from San Francisco, only a little less than 3 or 4 years ago, he was a beginner, and he progressed so hard because of the sincerity of his practice. So if we practice in this way, it will come to us. Cause and condition never fail. We just have to have right view, and that's what's really, really important. And take that right view to your group. Make sure that they're not just practicing their legs, that they're actually practicing something. Don't be afraid to ask them questions. What do you think mind is? Who is reciting the Buddha's name? Ask them, pin them down, make them feel uncomfortable. It's not making them, insulting them. It's making them feel like there's something there. Like Shifu used to say, it's like a sweet taffy candy that's stuck on the back of your throat. You want to give them that kind of a feeling, so that they tasted it sweet, but they want to resolve it. They want to finish it, because it's still stuck there. And I think that's probably the best way of understanding how to practice Chan. It's a very simplistic way of doing it, but it's just precise in terms of that you want to keep exploring. You want to finish that taffy, because it's still there and it's choking you, but it's sweet. But what it's choking is the uncomfortableness of the ego. We do not want to give the ego any fertile environment in which to exist. So when we contemplate, we give the ego nothing to chew on, and that's why it works. Pratika Samapada, what appears, what's there already, which is mind. So please, in your groups, pass this on. Make sure that they really are using the right end of the hoe to weed the garden. It doesn't help if they're using the wrong side. So this is something that is right view. Always stay true to the right view. Okay, all of you, please. And so some of you have been with me for a long time, and that now is a time for you to really practice hard and teach sincerely. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Oh, Robert, you're here. I was talking about you. So, okay. Next week, Amitofo. We will see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye, Gilbert. Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye. Thank you, Gilbert.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Gilbert.
Gilbert.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gilbert.
Thank you,
very
Gilbert.
much.
Thank you. Bring the dog out.
No, he should be chasing the rabbits right now. So if I walk outside right now, there'll be 5 rabbits on my lawn. But anyway, I'll
Get
have
them.
a talk.
Get them.
Huh?
I
Feed
say
them?
get them. Get them.
Get the rabbits. I think the owls, the
Yes.
owls are got their share of them too. But they, for some reason, we've got, if you go out and look around the yards, there's like 50 rabbits everywhere. So all I know is that I can only plant begonias because all my flowers will be eaten by the rabbits. So, okay, I will take a rest now. See you next week.